Hi, I'm Yvette Cameron. I'm the Senior Vice President of Oracle Cloud HCM Product Strategy, and I'm excited to be joined today by two industry experts to talk about the changing nature of skills management in organizations today. Now, for years, we've seen an increasing focus on skills and competency management, from the move to skills-based hiring to the improved delivery of learning to drive improved reskilling and upskilling initiatives across organizations. And yet a significant gap still exists in how skills are identified, managed, and developed across organizations. So what's needed is a new approach in identifying and managing these skills that is more dynamic, intelligent, trusted, and pervasive. So to talk more about how to create this new dynamic skills approach and to discuss the various phases in skills management transformation, I'm thrilled to have with me today Ray Wang, who is the founder of Constellation Research and also author of multiple books. Also joining me today is Aaron DeSmet. He's a senior partner at McKinsey & Company and the co-author of the recently published research by McKinsey entitled Building Workforce Skills at Scale to Thrive During and After the COVID-19 Crisis. Ray, Aaron, I'm so excited to have you joining me today. Thank you.
Oh, good to see you, Yvette.
Thanks, Yvette. Great to see you.
Ray, I'm going to start my first question with you. Fundamentally, where do you see organizations are struggling the most when it comes to understanding skills across their organization?
So the second hardest part in empowering employees is really putting that skills inventory together. It's getting the incentives behind it, getting people to think about why it's important for them to do this. But the hardest part is actually agreeing on ontologies. Both are barriers that can be overcome with experience, but one approach is to identify the hot skills first. How do we build for them? Take hard skills, AI, ML, data science, right? But also think about soft skills, leadership, empathy, communication, teamwork, problem solving, and critical thinking. These are all important areas, but start thinking about the humanization part and making sure folks are interested and there's a market for those inventory of skills.
That's great, Ray. So Aaron, skills are a hot topic right now, but it seems they've always been a hot topic, at least with regards to understanding and managing skills. So where do you see organizations struggling the most today around understanding their skills inventories?
I think they've always struggled to an extent, but there was more time in the past to figure it out. To get people, if you didn't have the right people, we'll find some new folks, we'll get them trained up. And over time, 5 years from now, we might have some incremental changes. We might need more of a skill, more depth in a skill, more senior people with more experience. We might need more of one role and fewer people in another role. What's happening today is technology and automation are fundamentally transforming roles. So half of a job might still exist and the other half might change into something totally different. And a lot of the skills we thought we had might not apply anymore. And skills we need might be adjacent skills. Many companies don't even track the skills beyond the job that the person's in. They may have a whole host of skills that could be relevant for a next generation of activities and work that we don't even know because we only tracked the skills directly relevant to the job they were hired into in the first place.
Those are great observations. So Ray, let me come back to you then. In your recent report about skills, you stress the importance of creating a dynamic approach to skills and competency development. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Once you've done your enterprise skills assessment, now you got to figure out how do you apply that skills assessment knowledge across talent processes, right? How do we tap into internal talent? How do we know the skills that are required for success on a job ahead of time so we can accelerate the identification of internal talent for these new roles? Then once we have that, we also want to sense demand signals for new skills. What are the hot skills? What are people going after? What courses are important? Where are people putting their energies, both on the demand side and the supply side? You're looking at the job boards and you're also looking at training to see where people are interested in what's going on. And of course, how do we encourage employees to maintain up-to-date profiles? Is that an incentive? How do we do recognition? How do we get people to manage that? Like knowledge bases were in the past. These are hard things. People don't always update their profiles. What can we do to make them more automated and easy to get there? And then, of course, how do we develop new skills in real time, especially in areas where we've got hot technologies where we want to think about training and development Think about reskilling. How do we create programs to deliver rapid and more frequent training programs and improve the training library? And then, of course, how do we encourage employees to quickly gain new skill sets and create a culture that supports the rapid learning there in terms of both the rewards and a recognition structure? And of course, how do we determine which skills and competencies to remove from the portfolio, things that are no longer relevant?
Ray, those are all fantastic observations. And the idea, especially of sensing skills and changes in the talent, the skills talent supply chain is phenomenal. A lot of what you mentioned, though, is some of the challenge that we faced over the past. How do we get employees to update their profiles? How do we track this information? So what makes today's approach dynamic, and what are some of the ways that organizations can really encourage a more dynamic approach?
Yeah, one of the ways to do that is to improve the incentives, right? Helping people understand the link between certain types of skills that are in demand with upward mobility or promotion or more time off, or thinking about the ability to actually improve another area that they might be interested, whether it's managing more people, whether it's becoming a better individual contributor. It's really tailoring back to people's needs, but there's got to be that incentive to get them to understand that updating a skills profile, updating their skills inventory actually gives them more opportunities to do the things that are more aligned with their work-life balance or, of course, their career goal aspirations.
Updating profiles seems to be the age-old challenge for us as an industry. Aaron, you co-authored the McKinsey's recent report outlining the results from your survey on reskilling. And I'm wondering, while you were doing that report and summarizing, were there any surprising insights for you? And what are some of the key takeaways from that research that you can share?
Yeah, there were quite a few, and I'll highlight a couple of them here. One of the things we found is that upskilling and reskilling is getting harder. Part of the reason for that is one of the disruptors that's causing this is technology. But what technology is disrupting is concrete work, simple work, routine work that frankly is easier to skill people up on. That's the work that's getting automated. The work that's left for people to do is more nuanced, it's more complex, it's more ambiguous, it's more creative, it's more judgment-based. And so what you're finding is that's harder to upskill people on, and there's multiple degrees of mastery on those types of more complex and more nuanced skills. And it's harder to figure out how good people can get at those things. In fact, it's harder to upskill people into a level of mastery in a traditional sort of training environment. You have to actually learn by doing. And so a lot of this dynamic reskilling has to happen not only in the classroom, even if it's intense, sort of experiential kind of learning, until you really get on the job, it's hard to get to a level of mastery, which requires us to think much more comprehensively and holistically about skilling, about all the micro skills that come together to let someone perform a job really well. It's not just a single skill, it's often the integration of multiple micro skills, which goes back in some ways to that, updating the profile. It's not just updating the profile for an individual, it's their peers, their bosses, their colleagues, commenting on how are they doing on these skills. It's constant feedback. It's constantly getting better at the gaps and closing the gaps as the requirements in the job change, which leads to one of the surprising insights. One of the things we thought we would find is companies that were bigger global companies that could really invest in reskilling would do a better job. And what we found is, in many cases, the companies that were doing the best at reskilling were smaller companies. And we're not sure exactly why that's true, but the hypothesis we have, and we have some evidence to support this, smaller companies are reskilling people where they are known. If you think about how many people you can know pretty well a social network of a couple hundred people. And so in many cases, these smaller efforts of reskilling 100 or 200 people in a smaller environment where they're known, and you can say, wow, I know Ray pretty well. I just don't think he's got all the requisite skills to learn that thing. We might want to point him in a different direction. But Yvette, boy, she's got it. She's got all, I know her, and I think she's up to the challenge. And in bigger organizations, it becomes a little bit more of an administrative Excel exercise, or maybe AI exercise, but the AI doesn't have all the data points. There's just, right now it's too complicated. And the input source data you would need to know, by and large, we're not collecting that data.
So everything that you've said is sounds exactly spot on from my perspective, and it sounds like skills transformation is really a phased approach. So maybe I know you've done some research in that. Maybe you can talk to us about the different phases of skills transformation.
Yes, there are multiple phases to this. It's not a one and done kind of activity where you just reskill, train people up and they're done. Even hiring, when that is a lever that people use, often what you find is the people you hire still need some level of upskilling or reskilling in certain particular areas, even if it's just learning your business, learning your products, learning your markets and your customers. So there's no single solution, which is why we're finding that upskilling and reskilling of your current employee base is often a better answer than trying to hire from outside. But to do that, it is a phased approach. You first have to understand what are the skills we have today and what are the skills we need. And what are some of the foundational competencies and adjacencies that would lend one person in a role to be an eligible and prospective good candidate for upskilling or reskilling for new work. And another person in the exact same role who's well performing, who might not have some of the foundational competencies or adjacent skills that would suggest they would be equally successful in some new work. So first of all, you have to understand the nature of the work that's being done today and that's going to be done tomorrow, and the skills that are going to be required to make that work and that worker successful in that role. That's the first phase. The second phase is architecting the shift and the upskilling of those skills, which isn't just the training, it's also the deployment of the talent into a series of developmental roles where they can get practice and feedback and on-the-job experience doing it and graduate to levels of mastery. And then over time, you can start to then really shift the workforce into the roles and the work of the future.
So Aaron and Ray, you both talked about different phases and different approaches. Let me come back to you, Ray, and ask, what does successful skills transformation look like to you?
Yeah, I think successful skills transformation is when you have a good market for skills and a good market for opportunities. And that's really where we've got a good match where employees know these are the top 5, top 10 skills to train for if you want to advance. These are the ones that we see a lot of demand for. Here's what's being offered internally. We've got a great ecosystem of courses, of participants in play. And I think that's when we actually see, the benefits of where dynamic skills are in place. And then more importantly, having that continuous learning culture inside organizations is important, where we see those reward mechanisms for learning, right? For that recognition of why learning is so important to each individual's success. So I think that's where we'd start, right? Building that continuous learning culture that's in place, where companies and employees and the ecosystems, feel that it's important. They make time for themselves for training. It becomes important. They stay curious, and more importantly, leaders lead by example, by taking time off too for themselves to actually develop, whether it's communication skills or learning how to recode. I think they're all very important.
Stay curious. I love that. I've always loved that, and it feels more important now than ever. Aaron, how about you? Any perspectives on your side as far as what successful skills transformation looks like?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what Ray said. I would add there's a team component to this as well. Increasingly, we're seeing real value creation in companies, innovation, execution, new product launches coming from cross-functional teams. And not only do you have to have the right skills in individual roles and jobs, you need to have the right skill mix on a team. And sometimes skills come from different players on the team. And so creating not only the skills marketplace, but a talent marketplace that says, look, we seem to have all the requisite skills, but we don't have anybody who understands the market in China, or we don't have anybody that understands the technical details of this product, or we've got a lot of people who understand coding, but nobody really knows how to code in Python, which is one of the languages we're going to need to build that new feature. So if you understand the micro skills needed, not only for individual roles, but also on a team, and create that dynamic teaming of skills, that's where the future is really headed.
So if I listen to both of you, there's so many opportunities for advancement and improvement in this space. And with so many different areas of possible investment, I'm wondering what trends in this skill space do you think we're going to be seeing in this coming year, in the next 12 months? And Aaron, I'll start with you.
Well, one of the things I think you're going to start to see is people starting to build out their ontology of skills beyond just the skills that people have in the job they're in today. One of the things we've done with people, and we have several partners we use to do this, is we'll do an outside-in analysis of people's talent and skills. And the outside-in thing that we can do in a week or two is much more robust than a company has of their own skills, because all of their own skill data is focused on the person in the job they're in today. And they've missed all of the skills that the person has acquired from other experiences that aren't formally tracked in the system of record. So I think the system of record itself is going to have to change. It's going to have to get broader, and we're going to have to get better at how do we integrate over time a skill mix and development paths. I also think you're going to start to see us incentivizing and rewarding skill acquisition, not just promotion up through a hierarchy.
I think your observation about, and you had said this earlier, about our skills information in our enterprise is largely based on the skills of the individual for the job that they hold, which means there's such a tremendous gap. I think that's a really important insight for organizations to take away. There's so many skills libraries and things that are in use, but to your point, we just have such a limited perspective. Ray, I'll turn it over to you. What trends are you seeing in this space for the next 12 months or so?
Well, in addition to what Aaron was saying, I actually say the inverse might be possible. We're going to see AI and ML engines create new job roles and descriptions that we would never thought of before, where we're mixing matching skills to create new positions based on need and demand. So a business unit might say, hey, I'm looking for, someone that understands how to do data science and multimedia communications, and boom, suddenly we create a new role that didn't exist. And we start looking in the organization to say, hey, who's got those skill sets? Oh, we've got an 80% match. Let's go actually hire for this new role that we've just created out of thin air. And of course, we've got comp plan and comp information and benefit information, so we can actually properly pay folks and compensate them for that and build the right incentives. So I think this is probably the year where we're going to see some of that stuff start to take off, and in some very, very progressive organizations.
If you think about what Ray just said, there's the work, there's the roles that get created. Perhaps AI will come up with some really interesting roles. There's the workers to fill those roles with the right skills. Increasingly now there's the workplace. We are now in a world where we can be more virtual than ever, but where we still value at times in-person collaboration, or at least being in the same time zone. So increasingly place and where having people at certain places at certain times is going to come into play of how you do some of this dynamic skilling and dynamic teaming.
I love it. So we talked about the trends. So what's the key technologies that you see coming? In fact, let me just ask you, what technology are you most excited about? Aaron, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to give a non-tech answer. I think with all of the automation and all of the AI and all of the digitization, what we're also going to see is the work that remains for humans to do will be increasingly human. And a lot of those human skills we do not measure or track very well. We sometimes say things like they are a good leader, which is very broad. Does that mean they have empathy and compassion? Does that mean they're visionary and inspiring? What does that actually mean? And we're going to have to get better and better at understanding the soft skills.
That's a great answer. You had me speechless there for a moment. Ray, how about you?
I was thinking about the leadership question here, and we actually have a framework for dynamic leadership that you can look up that talks about how to get to the core traits and then the varying traits that actually occur. On a tech front, I will answer analytics, automation, and AI are very interesting to me. That combination of how questions are being asked, how we actually build dynamic feedback loops with automation, how we actually automate, employee experiences and journeys that are across the way, and then more importantly, how we actually build what we call a business graph, the ability to actually keep learning and building that tribal knowledge in a digital core. And I think that's important, where we can actually see those opportunities kind of emerge. And then of course, AI and VR, like AR and VR are very interesting to me. The augmented reality, virtual reality pieces, I think they're transforming the way we learn and we experience things. We were in the middle of a training for a first responder scenario that was all done in AR. And I think you didn't understand the level of chaos until you were in there, and you could understand, oh my God, yes, how do you make a quick decision unless you've been trained for this? Because just the level of intensity, the level of confusion all happening at once, I think is a great way to actually bring scenarios to life.
So I have to ask you, gentlemen, we're all future lookers. We're thinking about what's happening and coming in the future, what's possible. And I can't help but feel that AI has a lot of expectations on it. It has for years with the promise of AI and what was possible even 7, 8 years ago, under delivered. So are we really at the time when, these advances that we're talking about here related to skills and insights, are we finally there where the technology meets the need and we're going to actually deliver?
Well, I look at it the same way we look at autonomous vehicles. There's 5 levels to get there. The basic level is kind of like, here's basic automation. We're on cruise control. You still have to do some steering, right? So that part is definitely in place. I think the second level is a little bit different. That's where we kind of have a little bit of, human intervention, right? We've still got like autopilot going, but we'll jump in once in a while if it decides to take a wrong turn. So we get that part. So we're definitely at level 2, but level 3, where we get to machine intervention. And that kind of works like you're backing up and it goes beep, 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 right? Oh, why did it break? Oh, there's something behind me, right? The machine intervention part, that's where we're starting to get a little bit good at, like, oh yeah, we need to screen out that resume. Oh, wait, we actually should include this individual in the search, right? That stuff is starting to pop up where we have those types of suggestions. But then when we get to like, some level of full autonomy, I don't think we're there yet on full autonomy. And I hope we get to that point where we have full autonomous and capabilities. And then after that, right, there's that, humans are optional, right? Now, full autonomous is kind of like you're at the airport and trains are moving around by themselves. There's no conductors. I took this one class, in senior year because I needed something on a Wednesday night, or so I didn't have to have a Thursday and Friday class. And it was something about the history of like railroad accidents, right? And think about it. It's like conductor's drunk, conductor's on a cell phone, conductor fell asleep, right? Well, you never see airport accidents in trains because they're fully automated and might be like a Homer Simpson like character in the back end, making sure everything's monitored, right? That's level 4. And then level 5, of course, is, full, humans are optional. We don't need them. So we're getting to that point.
The other thing that companies are going to start to explore is their ecosystem. So doing some of this beyond just their full-time permanent employed workforce, and look at a gig economy, look at partners and vendors, not just as some monolith who just feeds us kind of widgets to be put into play where needed, but actually to start to treat the talent, even if they're not full-time permanent employed, our own workforce, but treat the talent we're partnering with, that we're leveraging, that might not be our employees, and start to understand their skills, their motivations, their capabilities. I think that ecosystem play is really going to ramp up over the next year.
Hey, Aaron, to add to that point, I think that's amazing. I would also add alumni ecosystems. I think we tend to forget those and forget to put those into play. I mean, those are great places for talent, great places for referrals as people understand the culture and actually improve the net cast in terms of finding the right talent.
Absolutely.
Well, Ray and Aaron, you've given us a lot to think about. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you. To close, I'm wondering if you would share just one piece of advice for our audience as they work on their own skills strategy. Ray, would you like to start?
Sure. I think the important part is to have a continuous learning culture and really make learning fun again. And I think that's important for people to have that, that environment where people just enjoy learning, they celebrate it, they understand it's a lifelong approach. And I think that's the base of it, getting the right culture inside your organization.
Fantastic. Aaron.
I would add to that, because I agree with what Ray said. I would add, make upskilling and reskilling and skill development a muscle that you're constantly building, not events, not punctuated events around specific things. You will have to do that. There will be punctuated events around specific things. But if you wait to start doing the upskilling and reskilling and building out the skills database, if you wait until those events to do it, it's just not going to work. You need to constantly be working on how do we get better at skilling, upskilling, mastery, incentivizing learning, helping develop an apprentice, soft skills as well as hard skills, and even nurturing and developing some meta skills around openness to new experience and learning agility and adaptability. These are things that can be learned. So helping people learn how to learn is itself a skill that we can invest in.
Well, those are fantastic observations and recommendations. So thanks again, guys, for your time. Much appreciated.